Hey guys, it's Bella and welcome back to my channel. I hope you're all having an incredible day today. In today's video, we're going to be covering another Mystery Monday case, except today's case is not a mystery at all. It's a solved case because I know you guys love them. Before we get into today's case, I just want to mention I always get so many comments about my makeup looks, so I actually did a tutorial on this one for you guys, so that'll be up in a day or two. Keep an eye out. And my earrings are from my favorite place ever, Hungry Lala on Etsy. Make sure you guys check her out. And my top is from Million Wolf Vintage. Okay, let's get into it. So today we're going to be covering the disappearance of Shannon Matthews, and this case happened just 9 months after Madeleine McCann disappeared, which I'm sure you guys know about that case. It's like the most famous missing persons case ever. And Madeleine was obviously a 3-year-old girl, an English girl. She went missing in Portugal, but she was English, which I think is why this case as well got so big, because it was another young English girl who disappeared just 9 months after the most famous missing persons case in the entire world. Shannon was born on the 9th of September in 1998 in Dewsbury, England, to Karen Matthews and Leon Rose. And her mother Karen had grown up in Dewsbury. She dropped out of school at age 16 and also moved out of home because her and her parents had a bit of a falling out. She moved out, and then by age 17 she had her first child. I'm not really sure what the story is with the first father, whether they were actually in a relationship or whether it was just kind of a one-night stand and she got pregnant sort of thing, but whatever the case is, they didn't stay together. A few months after having her first daughter, she met Leon Rose, who was Shannon's father, and within a few months of meeting, she was pregnant with their first child, a son. And they had a very rocky, strained relationship, but they did stay together. And then by age 23, Karen was pregnant again with Shannon. She gave birth to her on the 9th of September, and straight out of the hospital, didn't go home to Leon, nothing like that. She went straight to her parents, June and Gordon's house. Karen and her parents had actually only recently recovered from another falling out that they'd had, but Karen really wasn't coping as a parent. She'd already shown signs of neglect with her other 2 sons, and June and Gordon were really strong parents themselves. They had raised 7 children of their own and really wanted to be there for their grandchildren as well. Karen and Shannon stayed with June and Gordon for the first few months of their lives until Karen finally decided to go home to Leon, where Shannon really didn't get the same care that she had gotten in the first few months of her life. She refused to buy diapers and instead used plastic bags and towels, and would rip up curtains just to avoid spending money on diapers. So instead she could spend money on cigarettes, takeout food, and beer. Eventually, about 2 to 3 years after Shannon was born in 2001, Leon and Karen split up, and Leon, at the request of Karen, took their son and moved about 10 miles away to a place called Huddersfield. In 2003, when Karen was 28 years old, she moved into a 3-bedroom house on the Moorside estate. She had 6 children by this point with 5 different fathers. 3 of the children, Shannon included, lived with her, and then 3 lived with their fathers at Karen's request. The Moorside estate that she moved to was a council estate, and at the time it was a pretty desirable place to live for anyone who was seeking council housing. There was a wait list. The government had spent £4 million trying to make it a safer place and revamping the area, trying to bring the community together. They had police posted on the streets really often trying to reduce the rate of crime in the area, because a lot of the residents said they felt unsafe walking around the estate, and the burglary rate in the area was also 2 times higher than the national average. They installed picnic tables, benches, play equipment for children, and they restored a lot of the homes in the estate. So it became a very, very highly sought after estate for anybody seeking council housing. A few months after Karen moved into Moorside estate, she met a new partner, Craig Meehan, who was 18 at the time they met. And let me remind you, she was 28 years old. I am 22, turning 23 next month, and I couldn't even imagine being attracted to and wanting to talk to an 18-year-old. It's just crazy to me. Karen and Craig moved in together pretty soon, and they lived right next door to Craig's sister Amanda and her husband Neil, who they were really close to. They also lived really, really close to Craig's mother Alice and Craig's other sister Caroline. And they settled in together really quickly, and then within 7 months of meeting, Karen was pregnant again with another son. From late 2002, Shannon and her siblings had been put on the council's at-risk register, which basically meant that Karen was going to be monitored pretty closely to make sure that she was adequately caring for her children. And the reason that they were put on there is because teachers, neighbours and family had all reported Karen to social services for not looking after her children properly and child neglect. Karen's sister Julie and her husband were one of the couple, I believe, that called social services on her because they had grown apart after so many years of arguing about Karen not looking after her children, and Julie was just sick of it. She was constantly worried about the kids and the fact that Karen never bought them real diapers or real food. She just fed them takeout every single night. Social workers were also concerned about the fact that on occasion Karen and Craig would leave the children at home by themselves for the entire night, and there was also some allegations of some pretty serious alcohol abuse. Social workers concluded that Karen's ability to take care of her children was compromised by her inability to place her children's needs above her own, which is why they were placed on the at-risk register. Unfortunately, a year later in 2004, they were taken off the at-risk register, and I say unfortunately because there was still obviously signs of child neglect. Why is it every time I try and film a Mystery Monday this happens? Shannon's teachers really worried about her and her level of concentration. She had trouble focusing on everything really, but in particular reading and writing for long periods of time. And her head teacher ended up calling social services because she just noticed that there was dirt caked on her body and her feet, and her clothes were always unwashed. Like I said, despite concerns and reports, they were taken off the at-risk register, which means that social services tapered down their visits. They would always call ahead, and this meant that Karen would have time to make her house look presentable when they were going to come, because she knew they were going to come. And her mother June, Karen's mother June, always said that she knew when social services were coming because Karen would ask for money, and June would ask, "Why do you need the money?" And she'd say, "I need to make it look like I have food in the fridge." And June said that this is the only time she ever actually put real food in her cupboard. I mean, Karen, she was a pretty neglectful mother from the get-go, and there were rumors that the reason that she had these children was so that she could get benefits. So for every child you have, you get benefits, and the more children you have, it means the more money you're bringing in, which means at 7 children, she was basically living off her benefits. She had like practically a full wage just on benefits from having children. So having kids was like her income. Until about 2007, Shannon would pretty regularly go and visit her dad in Huddersfield. She got along with him really well. She got along with her brother really well. She got along with Leon's new wife really well. But unfortunately, Leon and Karen had a falling out, and so Karen started refusing to allow Shannon to go and visit her father. By the 18th of February in 2008, Shannon was 9 years old, and she shared a room and a bunk bed with her 2-year-old sister, and her room was kind of like her sanctuary. She had all of her Bratz dolls, her porcelain dolls in there. She had pink wallpaper, which was kind of like peeling off of the walls, and she would almost use the walls as a diary. So she would write and scratch things into the walls underneath the parts of the wallpaper that were peeling, and she would write things like, very recently she wrote that she wanted to go and live with her dad, which I guess is understandable because it really didn't seem like Karen's house was a great place for a child to grow up. And her mum and Craig fought really often. They actually fought that night on the 18th. They got into this big blowout. Shannon actually swore at Craig, and then she ran down the road to her uncle's house, Karen's brother's house, because she just liked to be there. She got along really well with her cousins. I guess she might have felt safer there. And she really wanted to stay there the night, but her uncle really didn't want to get involved. So he made his 10-year-old daughter walk Shannon back home, and Shannon just cried the entire way home. The next day, on the 19th of February, was Shannon's 4th year's first swimming class, which she was so excited for. She'd been excited about it for a while. She woke up, she got dressed in her Westmore Junior school outfit. She put on her favourite rain boots, which were pink with fur around the edges. She got her swimming bag, her blue striped towel, and she left the house at about 8 a.m. To walk, I think it was like a half mile to her school. And as she was going to leave at 8 a.m., Karen had just woken up and she yelled out to Shannon as she was leaving and said, "Get out of the house and don't come back." And this just broke my heart because that was the last thing she ever said to Shannon. So she left for school having had those as the last words she would ever hear from her mother. Now, normally Shannon was a pretty shy, pretty quiet, like kept to herself kind of girl. But she definitely could be outgoing when she wanted to be, like with her friends. She definitely was not shy around her friends. She never really dwelled on her home life or let it get to her. I mean, occasionally her and her friends would talk about running away, but it was never serious. And I feel like that's just what kids do. I spoke about running away when I was younger and my parents were great. But that morning on the bus on the way to Dewsbury Sports Centre, she was really quiet and withdrawn. And her best friend Megan said that it was kind of strange because, one, she's not normally quiet or withdrawn, and two, she'd been so excited to go swimming, so it was, a bit unusual that she wasn't chirped up at the fact that they were on the way to their first swimming lesson. But then once they got to the sports centre and they got to the swimming lesson, she perked up. Her and Megan had a great time swimming. Then at about 3 p.m, the bus came to take them back to the school, and again on the bus ride back, she got really withdrawn and quiet again. Megan didn't really ask any questions, didn't want to pry. At around 3:10, the bus got back to the school. There was a teacher named Mrs. Tingle who was standing outside the front waiting for all the children to get off. And neither Mrs. Tingle nor Megan know which way Shannon went when she got off the bus, but all they know is that was the last time she was seen. At around 4 p.m, Shannon hadn't arrived home, so Karen went to knock on a neighbour's door to see if, she'd seen Shannon, which she hadn't, but Karen wasn't too worried because she thought maybe she'd just gone to a friend's house or a cousin's house on her way home. So she and Craig's sister Amanda decided to go to the shops. They got back at around 6:45ish p.m, which is when they noticed Shannon still wasn't there. And so at 6:48 p.m, Karen called 999 to report her missing.
Hiya, I want to put my daughter is missing, please. Right, how old is she? 9. 9? Yeah. When did you last see her? She went to school this morning. Right, have there been any arguments or anything? No, not at all.
Police arrived at the house at 7:15 p.m. and they were greeted by Craig and the other 3 children because Karen was not home. She was out searching. And when police did speak to her, she was adamant that Shannon wouldn't have run away because she was really happy at home. And she was convinced that somebody had abducted her. The officers asked if they could have a look around the house, which they noticed was pretty filthy. There was rubbish everywhere. There was clothes and shoes that had been strewn around. There was takeaway containers piled up in the kitchen. The house stunk of cigarettes. And initially when they asked, Craig got really defensive of this, which I guess, it's not really that uncommon. Some parents either feel defensive, like police are accusing them of something when they ask to search around the house or when they start asking family questions, or they might feel like, why are you wasting your time on me when you could be out looking for the person who actually did this, who actually took my daughter, sort of thing. And, police just explained that it's just something they have to do. It's just part of procedure. They just want to see if there's maybe any clues that could lead to who took her or where she went if she ran away, which did calm Craig down a little bit. It wasn't long before neighbours started showing up at Karen's house, and then once they realised what was happening, started helping her look for Shannon. Police also drove to Huddersfield to tell Shannon's father, Leon, what was going on, see if maybe she was there, which she wasn't. And Leon was just devastated at the news, hearing that Shannon was missing. He immediately drove back to Dewsbury and the Moorside estate to help look for her. A search team was put together that night. They started doing line searches of all neighbouring areas. They traced any routes that she could have taken to and from school. Neighbours, family, school friends and their families, just people from the general area. I guess word spread quickly, and all of these people started coming in flocks to help search for Shannon. They looked until about 4 a.m. Nobody found any sign of her whatsoever, which was definitely worrying because I think it got to about -9 degrees Celsius that night, which is freezing. So a lot of people were worried that if she was out on her own, if she had run away, that she could suffer the effects of hypothermia. The next day, on the 20th of February, they had over 200 officers helping search for Shannon. They knocked on doors, they questioned neighbors, they looked anywhere that they thought a young child might hide. They checked the hills, the moors around the general area to see if she was anywhere there. And after coming up with nothing, on this second day is when they started changing their mindset from thinking she's run away to believing that she had in fact been abducted. Julie Bushby, who was the head of the Tenants Association in the Moorside estate, began organising the civilian search for Shannon. The public were just super involved in this case, probably even more so because of the Madeleine McCann case, which was so fresh in people's minds, and they really wanted to do everything they could to help find Shannon. Many people dropped everything to be able to help aid in the search efforts. Police went back to Karen's home to speak to her and Craig to try and gather any information they might have at all that could lead to Shannon's whereabouts. And Karen was just a mess by this point. She was just staying cooped up at home with Craig and her other 3 children. Chief Superintendent Barry South also held a press conference on this day, the day after Shannon went missing, to assure the public that they were doing everything in their power that they could to try and find Shannon, because they really just didn't want to follow in the footsteps of the Portuguese police, who received a lot of criticism for how they handled Madeleine McCann's disappearance. So there was definitely a lot of pressure on the police. While police were there, they advised Karen not to make any press conferences, not to speak to the media in any way because it could harm their investigation. But against the advice of police, Karen did have kind of an impromptu press conference. She was clutching a teddy bear, and she basically said that she wanted Shannon to come home, that she was her little princess. But one of her best friends, Natalie, actually said that this press conference kind of made her a little bit sus on Karen because she never called Shannon her princess, ever. That was the first time for the media. And the teddy bear, when she asked if it was Shannon's teddy bear, she said that she didn't know. Kind of just using it to look innocent, oh, hey, I love my child. I'm holding a teddy bear. Vulnerable, to look vulnerable. 3 days after Shannon disappeared, every major police department was aiding in the search for Shannon. They called in the major inquiry and homicide teams. They had knocked on over 2,000 doors, asking every household if they had seen anything suspicious in the lead up to Shannon's disappearance. The nearby town of Wakefield, which the district's police academy was in, closed their doors. The police academy closed their doors, not the entire town. And they sent every available cadet out to the streets to search. They had over 200 officers searching. A helicopter with heat-seeking technology was dispatched. They had mounted police searching. They searched tall, overgrown, thick scrub, which was really hard to look through, but they searched every inch of it. There was a lake in which they had to break the ice of, which was formed at the top so that they could get divers down to search down there. Over 200 residents from Moorside and the surrounding areas showed up to help, which is crazy because none of them were asked to help. They just turned up. The residents printed hundreds of missing persons flyers with Shannon's photo on them. They also printed out hundreds of missing persons t-shirts with Shannon's photo on top of them, which all of the residents wore as they were out looking for Shannon and out, putting up the posters. The Sun newspaper offered a £20,000 reward for any information leading to Shannon's safe return, and a local business in Huddersfield also added another $5,000, and then the Sun later increased their reward to make the entire reward pool £50,000 for any information leading to the safe return of Shannon. It was a huge search effort. I think £3 million was spent on the search effort. and it was the biggest search in 30 years in Yorkshire since the Yorkshire Ripper. After a week had gone by, they had scientists, they had mountain rescue teams, they had specially trained victim recovery dogs, and still they found nothing. At home, Karen and a bunch of the local kids had planted flowers in Karen's front garden. There was like a group that released a bunch of balloons in Shannon's honor, and there was also candles lit all the way down the street, also in Shannon's honor. 2 weeks after Shannon went missing, police set up another press conference which both Karen and Leon spoke at. Karen wore a Help Find Shannon t-shirt and carried the teddy bear once again, and she was pretty unemotional and flat, especially in comparison to previous press conferences, but she continued to say that she was convinced that Shannon had been abducted and was still alive. She also said that she thought it was somebody who knew her that had taken her and now can't trust the people close to her anymore because of it, and she thought that somebody close to her took Shannon just to hurt her. She also said that the last thing Shannon said to her was, "I'll see you at tea time, Mum, love you," which... Shannon's father, Leon, was there as well, as I said, and he had been looking for Shannon every single day since she went missing, you know, handing out flyers, driving around, like he had just been endlessly searching for her. By this point, they had 250 officers involved, 60 detectives, they'd knocked on over 3,000 households, they had questioned over 1,500 motorists. They used victim recovery dogs to search over 500 homes on the route from Shannon's school to her home. They scrutinized the sex offenders list, they looked at over 800 CCTV tapes as well as computer hard drives. West Yorkshire Police also opened up a website called the Help Find Shannon Matthews Fund, which they had all of the information about the Shannon Matthews appeal. They posted a new photo of her. They also released the 999 call, which Karen made when she realized Shannon was missing. And the longer Shannon was missing, the more people started to speculate about what was happening, what may have happened to her. There were a lot of rumors swirling that Craig was abusive and violent towards Shannon, which both Leon and Karen defended him, saying that he wasn't. Craig also said that he had nothing to do with her disappearance. Karen's house, as well, as I said, was always completely swamped with media and reporters, and she still had 3 children at home. I can't even imagine how overwhelming this must have been for her other 3 kids. With Karen and her other 3 children's help, police managed to put together a full set of Shannon's fingerprints as well as a full DNA profile for Shannon. They were also able to determine from this, and had to sit Karen and Craig down to let them know that Karen and Craig's child was not actually Craig's child. Also, police got Karen and Craig to help them put together a full family tree because they wanted to go and visit all of these people, which was going to be a very slow process because there was over 350 people on this family tree. But they were, you know, trying to start off by compiling a list of people on this list who they thought may have been persons of interest to go and visit them first. However, police did end up getting a tip about somebody who wasn't on the list, Michael Donovan, which was Craig's uncle. He only lived half a mile away, but they forgot to put him on the list, which at first police didn't really think was anything because there's a lot of people on their list. There's 350 people, you know, easy to forget one person. And on top of that, Karen forgot that she had 7 kids. Like one time when she was having a chat with social services, I believe, she said that she only had 6 kids, and they were like, "Don't you have 7 kids?" And she was like, "Oh yeah," like kind of just brushed over it like it was nothing, that she just forgot how many kids she had. But it was bizarre that they didn't mention him despite the fact that he only lived half a mile away. Anyway, Michael Donovan was a bit of a loner. He didn't work either after having sustained a head injury in a car accident, so he just kind of lived off his disability benefits, but police definitely wanted to go and talk to him, just like they wanted to talk to everybody else on the family tree. But police were particularly interested in paying him a visit and asking him some questions after they found out not once had he helped in any of the searches for Shannon, despite living literally half a mile away from Karen. So Detective Nick Townsend and Paul Kettlewall, who had been, you know, questioning a lot of the people on the family tree, went to go and question him at Lydgate Gardens, which is where he lived. It was a large estate full of 2-story vanilla brick flats in Batley Car, and they arrived, you know, late morning, knocked on his door at unit number 24, but received no answer. So they decided to go and question a few of the neighbours, one of whom said that he should be home because his car's there and he never went anywhere without his car. After questioning a few more neighbours, they ended up questioning someone who lived directly below him. And she said that she had heard him walking around in his flat that morning. She also said that she heard what she thought was a child's footsteps or a child's scuffling. But she didn't report it. She didn't think anything of it because Donovan had just gotten a new girlfriend and she just kind of assumed that his new girlfriend had a kid, and that's what it was. The detectives, however, did not think it was something so innocent, and so they decided to call for backup. The operational search team arrived and they all met at the communal stairs of the flats to talk about what their next steps were. And they decided that it was better to break in and find nothing than to not break in and it turns out Shannon is there. It was really a risk that they were willing to take. So they broke his door down, entered the hallway into a completely silent and still house, and they went around searching for any kind of signs of somebody being there. They were trying to open all of the doors until eventually they got to a door that was locked, and with one swift kick they knocked the door down, and it smelt like fresh cigarette. One of the detectives put his hand down on the bed and he said that the sheets were still warm, and that is when they heard a small whimper and they heard a small child muffled saying, "Stop it, you're frightening me." The bed was a divan-style bed which had drawers underneath and solid sides, and it was really heavy. So when the two police officers tried to lift it, they couldn't even get it off the ground. Then they noticed something moving, and a small girl crawled out from one of the drawers at the bed base. She was too woozy, too disoriented to stand, so Detective Kettlewall picked her up and took her out of the room. He asked her where Michael Donovan was, which is when she told them he was also under the bed. And when officers peered through the crack from the drawer, lo and behold, there was Michael Donovan. He was curled up in the fetal position in the corner of the bed. No matter how much police yelled at him, he wouldn't come out. So they arrested him right there on the spot for suspicion of kidnapping. Eventually, police did manage to get him out, and after doing so, they had to drag this man, kicking and screaming, all the way to the police car. And as they were dragging him out, all of the neighbours started kind of gathering around the communal area. One of them yelled out, "Is that Shannon?" To which Kettlewall replied, "Yes." And the others were just kind of, hurling abuse at Donovan. Rightfully so. And he was placed in the back of a police car, and Shannon was placed in the back of a separate police car and taken straight to the police station. A forensic team was then set up outside of Donovan's flat, and they dusted the whole place for fingerprints, swabbed for any DNA. They found a long white tether coming from an opening in the ceiling and found it was tied to a beam in the roof. And when Donovan would go out, he would tie this around Shannon's waist to restrain her, and it was long enough for her to reach the bathroom and bed, but that was it. Under the bed, they also found temazepam and travel sickness medication, as well as £600 in cash, and the latest newspaper from The Sun, which announced the £50,000 reward for Shannon's safe return. They also found a piece of paper with a set of rules which Shannon had to abide by, which read, "You must not make any noise or bang your feet. You must not go near the windows. You must not get anything or do anything without me being here. Keep the TV volume low, only up to 8 or lower. You can play Super Mario games, and you can play some DVDs, and you can play the CD music." And at the bottom of this letter, it said IPU, which means I promise you. They also found a copy, this is kind of eerie and weird, but they found a copy of this children's colouring book called Arrive Alive, which is basically about traveling safely as a child. They also found 2 packed bags of clothes by the door. So, it was pretty obvious to them that he was going to flee. He had, the $600, the travel sickness medication, the duffel bags full of clothes. So, yeah, it was pretty obvious he was going to flee, and police truly believed that if he did flee, they would not have found Shannon at all, let alone alive. Police also discovered from his police records that the year before, he had abducted his own daughter, but the case was withdrawn from the courts after social services took over. Police obviously started to tell people that Shannon had been found safe. They told Leon, and he just said the moment was like winning the lottery. He was over the moon, and he just thanked everybody who helped search, the police officers, everything. And at the police station as well, people were crying and hugging, and one of the detectives named Andy Brennan also said that it was just like he'd never seen an incident room like it before, that it was just so emotional. I mean, a lot of the police officers themselves had children, so I can imagine like what they would be feeling. Julie Bushby was at the Dewsbury Moor Community Centre, which was like just a house they had in the Moorside estate that was there for the community and the Tenants Association, and that's where she found out, and she just went crazy. She started calling everyone, texting everyone. She was yelling, and people were gathering and crying and hugging each other and screaming and drinking and, you know, running around the streets dancing. Like, it would have been insane. Like, just reading about it, I cannot imagine how people would have been feeling. It sounds like that, like everyone was just dancing and partying and celebrating. They were all so happy that this girl had been found. You know, people ran to Karen's house to tell her. Police were also at Karen's house telling her, and there were news vehicles parked outside Karen's house who got the moment on camera. And Karen's reaction was very different to everybody else's. She stared blankly for a few seconds, like completely shell-shocked, and then just burst into tears and kind of turned her face away from everybody and away from the camera, which is something she hadn't done in the entire 24 days that Shannon had been missing. Julie Bushby actually yelled out to her and was like, "Smile, woman, why aren't you smiling?" And then other people as well started yelling at her like, "Smile, for God's sake, woman, smile." And so Karen turned to the camera and like smiled. The officers who were there to inform Karen also offered to drive her to the police station to see Shannon, where she wouldn't be able to see her like face to face, one-on-one. She would have to see her through like a window, just in order to preserve any forensic evidence, because it still was an ongoing investigation. But Karen's behavior just, it seemed super off to everybody around her. She showed no emotion. Her face was completely flat. She didn't ask any questions. She didn't say anything, show any emotion, put her hand up to the glass even. She just said, "Oh, she's got new clothes." That was it. That was all she said. She's got new clothes. I know people have different reactions, but like, what is that? Shannon was then taken into emergency care by social services and placed under police protection. They exercised, I think it was like Section 46 of the Children's Act 1989, which allows a child to remain a subject of police protection for 72 hours, and police released a statement saying that Shannon wouldn't be going home until their investigation is complete. Karen and Craig were also put up in a hotel that night to give them a break as well from all of the media that was constantly camped outside of their house. At this time, the day that Shannon was found, a massive party erupted on the Moorside estate. There was also assembly held at Shannon's school to tell all of the children that Shannon had been found safe, and so many of these kids just burst into tears, like with happiness. On their walk home from school, a bunch of the kids like walked arm in arm, and like a bunch of them were crying the whole way home. One of Shannon's friends, Kelly, had 22 letters that were written to Shannon from all of her friends while she was missing. And the children, I suppose, joined the party a little bit. The party went on all night. Local shops donated a bunch of champagne. You know, everyone was getting drunk, not the kids, of course. Maybe the kids, I don't know. I doubt it though, because they were like 9 years old. There was strobe lights, and someone was playing really, really loud music from their house for everyone to dance to. There was like this massive bed sheet that had been hung up from a window, which had massive words saying "Welcome Home" on it. Michael Donovan was taken to the Halifax police station, and initially he refused to speak, but eventually came up with a statement with his lawyer. His statement basically implicated Karen. He said that Karen had come to him with a plan. He looks after Shannon. Karen pretends Shannon's missing. They wait for the reward pool to go up, and then they share the money. He said that when the reward pool reached £25,000, that Karen contacted him to say, "I'll contact you with some further instructions once it reaches £50,000, and then she just never contacted him again once it reached £50,000 before he was arrested. He said that the reason he had to do it is because Karen threatened him, and she said that if he didn't do it, she would get these 3 guys onto him that she knew, one of which he knew had actually killed somebody. He said that he didn't hurt Shannon at all and had even gone out to buy her clothes and toys and never once harmed her. Donovan was actually born as Paul Drake, and he was the youngest of 9 children. He grew up on an estate not far from the flat that Shannon was found at, and he started getting in trouble with the law at age 11. His first offenses were arson and shoplifting, and then when he was 16, he was convicted of causing criminal damage, after which he ran away from home and never returned. And then at 19, he changed his name by deed poll to Michael Donovan, after his hero of the same name from his fave TV show, which I think was called V. He found work as a labourer and delivery driver at an engineering company where he apparently showed very little common sense, and he was described as a bit of a loner, a bit of somebody who mostly kept to themselves. He had met Karen the previous November at the wake for Karen's father, and they kind of just hit it off, drinking beers in the kitchen, and another family member walked in while Karen was apparently falling all over him and sitting on his knee, and there were rumors that they'd been having an affair. So I heard this and I really tried to look into who Karen and Craig's son was that wasn't Craig's, who the actual father was, and I couldn't find anything. But if Donovan and Karen did have an affair, is it possible that it's his? Anyway, the next day after he came out and said this to the police confirmed that Shannon was doing well. She was being gently questioned by police to try and figure out what happened. And over the following weeks, she had 10-minute sessions a day in this special room that was made to resemble a children's classroom. Eventually, when Shannon ceased to be under police protection, she was given over to the Kirklees Family Service and was eventually moved away from the Dewsbury area. On the 17th of March in 2008, 3 days after Shannon was found, Michael Donovan was officially charged and remanded into police custody. He appeared in Leeds Crown Court via a video link, and a trial date was officially set for the 11th of November, 8 months later. Now, back at the estate, while all of this was going on, neighbours, friends, family really started to question Karen and some of her moves and the way that she was acting. They thought it was weird that she wasn't asking after Shannon, she wasn't asking any questions, she wasn't, angry that the person who had abducted her daughter was a family member, and the way that she was behaving was making people look back at the way that she had been acting while Shannon was missing. For example, she would just laugh and, hang about with Craig at the house and, not really a care in the world while her daughter was missing. But then as soon as the cameras would come on, she would completely change. She would start crying. She would look sad and whatever. And I guess at the time, while all of it was happening, people weren't really scrutinizing a grieving mother. They were just trying to find this girl, this 9-year-old girl who had gone missing. They weren't looking at how many times Karen Matthews cried. And even when police told Karen that Shannon wouldn't be able to go home and that they were running tests for signs of abuse, Karen literally just responded, okay. That was it. I feel most normal mothers, even if they understood that their, child had to still be in police custody for whatever reason, would still, fight to try and see their child or want their child home or ask some sort of questions, show some sort of emotion, try and give their kid a message or, something like that. And, obviously police are telling this to Karen, but the real reason she's allowed home is, one, because of Donovan's accusations against Karen, which police actually already, during the, 24 days Shannon was missing, were actually already suspicious of Karen, but we'll get into that a little later. On top of that though, on the 2nd of April, Craig was arrested under suspicion of having child pornography because, if you remember, I said they searched the houses. They also, police took their computers and searched through their computers as part of the investigation, and they found child pornography on his computer. He was remanded in custody the next day and was charged with 11 counts of possessing indecent images of children. The next day, Craig's sister Amanda was also arrested on suspicion of aiding an offender. Craig's mother Alice Jess, who was Donovan's sister, was also arrested for assisting an offender or suspicion of assisting an offender, but also on attempting to pervert the course of justice, both of whom were released on bail though. Some of Karen's friends by this point as well were starting to get really antsy, really frustrated. They were asking Karen questions and getting really vague answers. And after Craig was arrested is when, you know, their suspicions just went into overdrive. They decided that they needed to confront her. Julie Bushby and Karen's friend Natalie decided that they were going to confront her. They were both aware of Donovan's statement against Karen, but on top of that, they already had their own suspicions of Karen. So they decided to contact the family liaison officer who was dealing with Shannon and the Matthews family. Her name was Christine Freeman, who agreed to help them. So Christine picked Karen up, who sat in the passenger seat of her car, front passenger seat of her car. The two of them then went to pick up Julie Bushby and Karen's friend Natalie. And they started to tell her about the rumors that people, you know, that they'd been hearing and people had been spreading that she had something to do with Shannon's abduction. And then Julie just decided to ask her flat out, were you involved in Shannon's abduction? And Karen just started sobbing. She said, it's true. And she was just crying hysterically with, more emotion than she had shown in any of the weeks while her daughter was missing. So Karen was immediately arrested on the 6th of April in 2008, 47 days after Shannon's disappearance, and she was charged with or arrested on suspicion of attempting to pervert the course of justice and child neglect. And Craig as well was not charged with anything to do with Shannon's disappearance. The day that Karen was arrested, police also announced that they were searching and investigating into the fact that Karen's family had been contacting the Madeleine McCann Fund trying to ask for money. Kate and Jerry McCann had received multiple phone calls and emails from Shannon's family asking for them to donate money to the Find Shannon appeal, and the McCann family's spokesperson, his name's Clarence Mitchell, said that they were super blunt about it, just saying things like, Madeleine's fund has got loads of money, can't you just give us some? Police actually think that Madeleine McCann's disappearance inspired Karen to abduct her own daughter for money, and the McCanns themselves were on the verge of giving £25,000 to Karen until police got in contact with them and said, some things have come to light in our investigation and we really think it would be better if you didn't. So Michael Donovan and Karen both had, their own version of events, their own stories, and police managed to piece them together to come up with what they think was the real story. So what police believe happened from piecing these two stories together is that in a small local cafe, Karen planned to meet Donovan. She showed up with her youngest 2-year-old daughter strapped into her buggy, and over a mug of tea presented her plan to Michael Donovan. Initially, she asked Donovan to look after her eldest son in what would be a staged kidnapping as well, which Donovan refused, and then Karen was like, you know what, you're right. I think we would actually probably get more money if we abducted Shannon. Karen explained to him that she would report Shannon missing, and then after the reward pool got to £50,000, she would contact Donovan in order to discuss what the next steps were. And then Donovan was going to take Shannon to Dewsbury Market, out of sight of CCTV, and then he was going to, inside of CCTV, magically find her, take her to the police, and claim the reward money. Police thought it was very likely that Karen didn't realize that it would take 3 weeks. She thought that maybe it would be a matter of days. And she ended up giving Michael Donovan a A4 piece of paper which detailed, what the plan was. He had to memorize this, and then she told him that he had to flush it down the toilet. And when he said that he didn't want to do it, she threatened him with these 3 dudes, these 3 burly, buffed dudes that she knew, one of whom Michael Donovan had heard that had actually killed somebody. After the arrest took place, police actually had to go around the estate and hand out these anti-vigilante flyers because, as you can imagine, everyone was feeling really betrayed and they had started attacking Karen's house. Thankfully, the other 3 children had been taken into care, but the walls and the windows of Karen's, or what used to be house, had to be boarded up. They had to put metal screens against the windows to prevent any further damage. And it was a really sad time for you know, Shannon's friends, the people that knew her, the people in the neighborhood, because it was almost like losing her again. You know, they felt this extreme happiness of finding her, only to find out that they're never going to be able to see her again because it was her own mother that abducted her. And so she had to be placed elsewhere. They actually ended up giving her a completely new identity, and none of her friends, family ever got to see her again. Her grandparents, June and Gordon, never got to see her again. Her dad, Leon Rose, never got to see her again. Not entirely sure why she wasn't placed with them. And her grandparents, like, they were so sad, and they hope that when she's old enough to do so, that she can reach out and contact them. But they, besides a few updates from social services, haven't heard from her, haven't been able to see her. She was given a completely new life, new name, everything. It's funny because it turns out that Karen Matthews abducting her own daughter was actually the best thing that she ever could have done for anybody in her family, because now all of her children have new homes, and, well, the children that were with her all have new homes. Shannon has a new home, and I'm sure they're better than what Karen was providing with them. Well, I hope so. Craig Meehan pleaded not guilty to his 11 counts of possession of indecent images of children. However, he was convicted and sentenced to 20 weeks, but because the time that he was in custody waiting for his trial was longer than 20 weeks, he was released straight away. Karen and Donovan were both tried together on November 11th in 2008 at Leeds Crown Court. In court, it was told that Shannon knew nothing of the plan and that she was tricked into getting a lift with Donovan after school, and he said he was going to take her to a fair when actually he took her and abducted her and kept her in his house for 24 days and tied her up so that she could only get to the bedroom and the bathroom. And due to the reports in court of him tying her up and whatever else, despite the fact that he claimed he treated her well and, like, took her for walks in the park with her hood on and bought her clothes and whatever, he was beat up in prison after these, you know, the allegations came out and the fact that he tied her up in the house came out. And so in court, he had a broken jaw from being beat up in prison. A forensic toxicology report also came out saying that she had been given temazepam and travel sickness medication to keep her subdued while she was in captivity, but it also showed that these drugs had been given to her for up to 20 months before she was abducted, which would definitely explain why she had a lack of concentration and couldn't really focus that well in school, because these medications would have been messing with her, and she was only 9 years old, so she would have just probably thought that this was normal. This was a normal feeling to just not be able to concentrate ever. It was likely that these drugs made her feel fuzzy, confused, and also slow and unable to concentrate. Karen in court was like crying. She was denying that she had anything to do with the disappearance. She gave like 5 different stories of events. So at the end of the trial, after a jury deliberated for 6 hours, both Michael Donovan and Karen Matthews were convicted or found guilty of perverting the course of justice, false imprisonment, and kidnapping, and both of them were served or sentenced to a measly 8 years. Like, they're literally both out now, and Karen's engaged. Just abducted my daughter, no worries. Now I'm engaged, check out my ring. 8 years. I get that she wasn't like severely harmed or anything, but that's so cooked. And the way that she just like neglected her children, and social services came out with a statement saying there was no way we could have known that she was going to do what she was going to do. And it just reminds me of the Gabriel Fernandez case. If you guys have heard of that, I strongly recommend watching the Netflix documentary on it. But that's it. That's the entire case. I would love to know your thoughts in the comments down below. As always, please feel free to leave me case suggestions down there. And thanks for watching, guys. Hopefully I will see you in my next video. Bye, guys.